Lolo Enki TV.
Session 17. February 3, 1981. Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the infinite Creator. Before we communicate by answer, we shall correct an error which we have discovered in the transmission of our information to you. We have difficulty dealing with your time-space. There may again be errors of this type. Feel free to question us that we may recalculate in your time-space measurements. The error we have discovered concerns one of the arrivals of both the Orion group into your planetary sphere of influence and the corresponding arrival of emissaries of the Confederation. We gave dates of 2,600 years for the Orion entry, 2,300 for Confederation entry. This is incorrect. The recalculation indicates numbers 3,600 for Orion entry, 3,300 for Confederation entry. We communicate now. Questioner, thank you very much. I would like to say again that we consider it a great honor, privilege, and duty to be able to do this particular work. I would like to reiterate that some of my questions may seem irrelevant at times, but I am trying to ask them in a manner so as to gain a foothold into the application of the Law of One. We are now in the fourth density. Will the effects of the fourth density increase in the next 30 years? Will we see more changes in our environment and our effect upon our environment? Ra, I am Ra. The fourth density is a vibrational spectrum. Your time-space continuum has spiraled your planetary sphere and your, what we would call galaxy, what you call star, into this vibration. This will cause the planetary sphere itself to electromagnetically realign its vortices of reception of the instreaming of cosmic forces expressing themselves as vibrational webs so that the Earth thus be fourth density magnetized, as you may call it. This is going to occur with some inconvenience, as we have said before, due to the energies of the thought forms of your peoples which disturb the orderly constructs of energy patterns within your Earth spirals of energy which increases entropy and unusable heat. This will cause your planetary sphere to have some ruptures in its outer garment while making itself appropriately magnetized for fourth density. This is the planetary adjustment. You will find a sharp increase in the number of people, as you call mind-body-spirit complexes, whose vibrational potentials include the potential for fourth vibrational distortions. Thus, there will seem to be, shall we say, a new breed. These are those incarnating for fourth density work. There will also be a sharp increase in the short run of negatively oriented or polarized mind-body-spirit complexes and social complexes. Due to the polarizing conditions of the sharp delineation between fourth density characteristics and third density self-service orientation, those who remain in fourth density upon this plane will be of the so-called positive orientation. Many will come from elsewhere, for it would appear that with all the best efforts of the Confederation, which includes those from your people's inner planes, inner civilizations, and those from other dimensions, the harvest will still be much less than this planetary sphere is capable of comfortably supporting in service. Questioner, is it possible by the use of some technique or other to help an entity to reach fourth density level in these last days? Ra, I am Ra. It is impossible to help another being directly. It is only possible to make catalyst available in whatever form, the most important being the radiation of realization of oneness with the Creator from the Self, less important being information such as we share with you. We, ourselves, do not feel an urgency for this information to be widely disseminated. It is enough that we have made it available to 3, 4, or 5. This is extremely ample reward, for if one of these obtains fourth density understanding due to this catalyst, then we shall have fulfilled the Law of One in the distortion of service. We encourage a dispassionate attempt to share information without concern for numbers or quick growth among others. That you attempt to make this information available is, in your terms, your service. The attempt, if it reaches one, reaches all. We cannot offer shortcuts to enlightenment. Enlightenment is, of the moment, an opening to intelligent infinity. It can only be accomplished by the self, for the self. Another self cannot teach learn enlightenment, but only teach learn information, inspiration, or a sharing of love, of mystery, of the unknown that makes the other self reach out and begin the seeking process that ends in a moment. But who can know when an entity will open the gate to the present? Questioner, thank you. Can you tell me who was the entity, before his incarnation on earth, known as Jesus of Nazareth? Ra, I am Ra. I have difficulty with this question as it is phrased. Can you discover another form for this query? Questioner, What I meant to say was, can you tell me if Jesus of Nazareth came from the Confederation before incarnation here? Ra, I am Ra. The one known to you as Jesus of Nazareth did not have a name. This entity was a member of fifth density of the highest level of that suboctave. This entity was desirous of entering this planetary sphere in order to share the love vibration in as pure a manner as possible. Thus, this entity received permission to perform this mission. This entity was then a wanderer of no name, of Confederation origins, of fifth density, representing the fifth density understanding of the vibration of understanding or love. Questioner, did you say the fifth vibration was that of love? Ra, I am Ra. I have made an error. The fourth density being is that which we intended to say, the highest level of fourth density going into the fifth. This entity could have gone on to the fifth but chose instead to return to third for this particular mission. This entity was of the highest suboctave of the vibration of love. This is fourth density. Questioner, when I am communicating with you as Ra, are you at times individualized as an entity or am I speaking to an entire social memory complex? Ra, I am Ra. You speak with Ra. There is no separation. You would call it social memory complex, thus indicating manyness. To our understanding, you are speaking to an individualized portion of consciousness. Questioner, am I always speaking to the same individualized portion of consciousness in each of the sessions? Ra, I am Ra. You speak to the same entity through a channel or instrument. This instrument is at times lower in vital energy. This will sometimes hamper our proceedings. However, this instrument has a great deal of faithfulness to the task and gives whatever it has to this task. Therefore, we may continue even when energy is low. This is why we usually speak to the ending of the session due to our estimation of the instrument's levels of vital energy. Questioner, I would like to make a point clear now that I am sure of myself. The people of this planet, following any religion or no religion at all, or having no intellectual knowledge at all of the law of one, can still be harvested into the fourth density if they are of that vibration. Is that not correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. However, you will find few who are harvestable whose radiance does not cause others to be aware of their, what you may call, spirituality, the quality of the mind-body-spirit complex distortion. Thus, it is not particularly probable that an entity would be completely unknown to his immediate acquaintances as an unusually radiant personality. Even were this individual not caught up in any of the distortions of your so-called religious systems. Questioner, when Jesus of Nazareth incarnated, was there an attempt by the Orion group to discredit him in some way? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner, can you tell me what the Orion group did in order to try to cause his downfall? Ra, I am Ra. We may describe in general what occurred. The technique was that of building upon other negatively oriented information. This information had been given by the one whom your peoples called Yahweh. This information involved many strictures upon behavior and promised power of the third density, service to self-nature. These two types of distortions were impressed upon those already oriented to think these thought forms. This eventually led to many challenges of the entity known as Jesus. It eventually led to one, sound vibration complex Judas, as you call this entity, who believed that it was doing the appropriate thing in bringing about or forcing upon the one you call Jesus the necessity for bringing in the third density planetary power distortion of third density rule over others. This entity, Judas, felt that, if pushed into a corner, the entity you call Jesus would then be able to see the wisdom of using the power of intelligent infinity in order to rule others. The one you call Judas was mistaken in this estimation of the reaction of the entity, Jesus, whose learning was not oriented towards this distortion. This resulted in the destruction of the bodily complex of the one known as Jesus. Questioner, then if the entity Jesus was fourth density and there are wanderers on the planet today who came from fifth and sixth density, what was it that Jesus did that enabled him to be such a good healer, and could these fifth and sixth density beings here now do the same? Ra, I am Ra. Those who heal may be of any density which has the consciousness of the spirit. This includes third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. The third density can be one in which healing takes place just as the others. However, there is more illusory material to understand, to balance, to accept, and to move forward from. The gate to intelligent infinity can only be opened when an understanding of the instreamings of intelligent energy are opened unto the healer. These are the so-called natural laws of your local space-time continuum and its web of electromagnetic sources or nexi of instreaming energy. Know then, first, the mind and the body. Then as the spirit is integrated and synthesized, These are harmonized into a mind-body-spirit complex which can move among the dimensions and can open the gateway to intelligent infinity. Thus healing self by light and sharing that light with others. True healing is simply the radiance of the self causing an environment in which a catalyst may occur which initiates the recognition of self, by self, of the self-healing properties of the self. Questioner: how did Jesus learn this during his incarnation? Ra: I am Ra. This entity learned the ability by a natural kind of remembering at a very young age. Unfortunately, this entity first discovered his ability to penetrate intelligent infinity by becoming the distortion you call angry at a playmate. This entity was touched by the entity known as Jesus and was fatally wounded. Thus the one known as Jesus became aware that there dwelt in him a terrible potential. This entity determined to discover how to use this energy for the good, not for the negative. This entity was extremely positively polarized and remembered more than most wanderers do. Questioner: how did this aggressive action against a playmate affect Jesus in his spiritual growth? Where did he go after his physical death? Ra: I am Ra. The entity you call Jesus was galvanized by this experience and began a lifetime of seeking and searching. This entity studied first day and night in its own religious constructs which you call Judaism and was learned enough to be a rabbi, as you call teach learners of this particular rhythm or distortion of understanding, at a very young age. At the age of approximately 13 and 1/2 of your years, this entity left the dwelling place of its earthly family, as you would call it, and walked into many other places seeking further information. This went on sporadically until the entity was approximately 25, at which time it returned to its family dwelling, and learned and practiced the art of its earthly father. When the entity had become able to integrate or synthesize all experiences, the entity began to speak to other selves and learn what it had felt during the preceding years to be of a worthwhile nature. The entity was absolved karmically of the destruction of another self when it was in the last portion of lifetime and spoke upon what you would call a cross saying. Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. In forgiveness lies the stoppage of the wheel of action, or what you call karma. Questioner: what density is the entity known as Jesus in now? Ra: I am Ra. This information is harmless though unimportant. This entity studies now the lessons of the wisdom vibration, the fifth density, also called the light vibration. Questioner: in our culture there is a saying that he will return. Can you tell me if this is planned? Ra: I am Ra. I will attempt to sort out this question. It is difficult. This entity became aware that it was not an entity of itself but operated as a messenger of the one creator whom this entity saw as love. This entity was aware that this cycle was in its last portion and spoke to the effect that those of its consciousness would return at the harvest. The particular mind-body-spirit complex you call Jesus is, as what you would call an entity, not to return except as a member of the Confederation speaking through a channel. However, there are others of the identical congruency of consciousness that will welcome those to the fourth density. This is the meaning of the returning. Questioner: can you tell me why you say that the Earth will be fourth density positive instead of fourth density negative since there seems to be much negativity here now? Ra: I am Ra. The Earth seems to be negative. That is due to the quiet, shall we say, horror which is the common distortion which those good or positively oriented entities have towards the occurrences which are of your time-space present. However, those oriented and harvestable in the ways of service to others greatly outnumber those whose orientation towards service to self has become that of harvestable quality. Questioner: in other words there will be fewer negative entities than positive entities harvested into the fourth density. Is this correct? Ra: I am Ra. This is correct. The great majority of your peoples will repeat third density. Questioner: how did Taras Bulba, Genghis Khan, and Rasputin get harvested prior to the harvest? Ra: I am Ra. It is the right privileged duty of those opening consciously the gate to intelligent infinity to choose the manner of their leaving of third density. Those of negative orientation who so achieve this right duty most often choose to move forward in their learned teaching of service to self. Questioner: am I to understand that the harvest is to occur in the year 2011, or will it be spread out? Ra: I am Ra. This is an approximation. We have stated we have difficulty with your time-space. This is an appropriate probable possible time-space nexus for harvest. Those who are not in incarnation at this time will be included in the harvest. Questioner: if an entity wants to be of service to others rather than service to self while he is in this third density, are there best ways of being of service to others, or is any way just as good as any other way? Ra: I am Ra. The best way to be of service to others has been explicitly covered in previous material. We will iterate briefly. The best way of service to others is the constant attempt to seek to share the love of the Creator as it is known to the inner self. This involves self-knowledge and the ability to open the self to the other self without hesitation. This involves, shall we say, radiating that which is the essence or the heart of the mind-body-spirit complex. Speaking to the intention of your question, the best way for each seeker in third density to be of service to others is unique to that mind-body-spirit complex. This means that the mind-body-spirit complex must then seek within itself the intelligence of its own discernment as to the way it may best serve other selves. This will be different for each. There is no best. There is no generalization. Nothing is known. Questioner: I don't wish to take up extra time asking questions over again. Some areas I consider important enough in relation to the law of one to ask questions in a different way in order to get another perspective in the answer. In the book OASP it states that if an entity goes over 51% service to others and is less than 50% service to self, then that entity is harvestable. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct if the harvesting is to be for the positive fourth dimensional level. Questioner: what is to be the entity's percentage if he is to be harvested for the negative? Ra, I am Ra. The entity who wishes to pursue the path of service to self must attain a grade of 5, that is 5% service to others, 95% service to self. It must approach totality. The negative path is quite difficult to attain harvestability upon and requires great dedication. Questioner: why is the negative path so much more difficult to attain harvestability upon than the positive? Ra, I am Ra. This is due to a distortion of the law of one which indicates that the gateway to intelligent infinity be a gateway at the end of a straight and narrow path, as you may call it. To attain 51% dedication to the welfare of other selves is as difficult as attaining a grade of 5% dedication to other selves. The, shall we say, sinkhole of indifference is between those two. Questioner: then if an entity is harvested into the fourth density with a grade of 51% for others and 49% for self, what level of the fourth density would he go into? I am assuming that there are different levels of the fourth density. Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. Each enters that subdensity which vibrates in accordance with the entity's understanding. Questioner: how many levels do we have here in the third density at this time? Ra, I am Ra. The third density has an infinite number of levels. Questioner: I've heard that there are 7 astral and 7 devachanic levels. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. You speak of some of the more large distinctions in levels in your inner planes. That is correct. Questioner: who inhabits the astral and devachanic planes? Ra, I am Ra. Entities inhabit the various planes due to their vibration nature. The astral plane varies from thought forms in the lower extremities to enlightened beings who become dedicated to teach learning in the higher astral planes. In the devachanic planes, as you call them, are those whose vibrations are even more close to the primal distortions of love light. Beyond these planes there are others. Questioner: are there 7 subplanes to what we call our physical plane here? Ra, I am Ra. You are correct. This is difficult to understand. There are an infinite number of planes. In your particular space-time continuum distortion there are 7 subplanes of mind-body-spirit complexes. You will discover the vibrational nature of these 7 planes as you pass through your experiential distortions, meeting other selves of the various levels which correspond to the energy influx centers of the physical vehicle. The invisible, or inner, third density planes are inhabited by those who are not of body complex natures such as yours, that is, they do not collect about their spirit-mind complex as a chemical body. Nevertheless, these entities are divided in what you may call an artificial dream within a dream into various levels. In the upper levels, desire to communicate knowledge back down to the outer planes of existence becomes less, due to the intensive learn teaching which occurs upon these levels. Questioner: is it necessary to penetrate one level at a time as we move through these planes? Ra, I am Ra. It has been our experience that some penetrate several planes at one time. Others penetrate them slowly. Some in eagerness attempt to penetrate the higher planes before penetrating the energies of the so-called more fundamental planes. This causes energy imbalance. You will find ill health, as you call this distortion, to frequently be the result of a subtle mismatch of energies in which some of the higher energy levels are being activated by the conscious attempts of the entity while the entity has not penetrated the lower energy centers or subdensities of this density. Questioner: is there a best way to meditate? Ra, I am Ra. No. Questioner: at this time, near the end of the cycle, how are reincarnations into the physical allocated, shall we say? on this planet. Ra, I am Ra. Entities wishing to obtain critically needed experience in order to become harvestable are incarnated with priority over those who will, without too much probable possible doubt, need to re-experience this density. Questioner, how long has this type of allocation been going on? Ra, I am Ra. This has been going on since the first individual entity became conscious of its need to learn the lessons of this density. This was the beginning of what you may call a seniority by vibration. Questioner, can you explain what you mean by a seniority by vibration? Ra, I am Ra. This will be the final question of this session of working. The seniority by vibration is the preferential treatment, shall we say, which follows the ways of the law of one, which encourages harvestable individuals. Each individual becoming aware of the time of harvest and the need on a self-level to bend mind, body, spirit towards the learned teaching of these lessons, by giving them priority in order that an entity may have the best possible chance, shall we say, in succeeding in this attempt. May we ask at this time if there are any brief questions? Questioner, my only question is, what can we do to make the instrument more comfortable? Ra, I am Ra. This instrument is not wearing the appropriate apparel for this work. As inpourings occur in the regions of the, what you may call, 7th chakra as you speak of these energy centers, filtering through the 6th and so forth, the entity's other or base chakras become somewhat de-energized. Thus, this entity should be more careful in its selection of warm apparel for the part of the body complex you call the feet. May we answer any other brief questions? Questioner, then we want to put heavier clothing on the feet. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. I will leave this instrument now. I leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite creator. Adonai. Session 18. February 4th, 1981. Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. We communicate now. Questioner, I was thinking last night that if I were in the place of Ra right now, the first distortion of the law of one might cause me to mix some erroneous data with the true information that I was transmitting to this group. Do you do this? Ra, I am Ra. We do not intentionally do this. However, there will be confusion. It is not our intent in this particular project to create erroneous information, but to express in this confining ambience of your language system the feeling of the infinite mystery of the one creation in its infinite and intelligent unity. Questioner, thank you. I have a question here that I will read. Much of the mystic tradition of seeking on earth holds the belief that the individual self must be erased or obliterated and the material world ignored for the individual to reach nirvana, as it is called, or enlightenment. What is the proper role of the individual self and its worldly activities to aid an individual to grow more into the law of one? Ra, I am Ra. The proper role of the entity is in this density to experience all things desired, to then analyze, understand, and accept these experiences, distilling from them the love light within them. Nothing shall be overcome. That which is not needed falls away. The orientation develops due to analysis of desire. These desires become more and more distorted towards conscious application of love light as the entity furnishes itself with distilled experience. We have found it to be inappropriate in the extreme to encourage the overcoming of any desires, except to suggest the imagination rather than the carrying out in the physical plane, as you call it, of those desires not consonant with the law of one, thus preserving the primal distortion of free will. The reason it is unwise to overcome is that overcoming is an unbalanced action creating difficulties in balancing in the time-space continuum. Overcoming, thus, creates the further environment for holding on to that which apparently has been overcome. All things are acceptable in the proper time for each entity, and in experiencing, in understanding, in accepting, in then sharing with other selves, the appropriate distortion shall be moving away from distortions of one kind to distortions of another which may be more consonant with the law of one. It is, shall we say, a shortcut to simply ignore or overcome any desire. It must instead be understood and accepted. This takes patience and experience which can be analyzed with care, with compassion for self and for other self. Questioner, basically I would say that to infringe upon the free will of another entity would be the basic thing never to do under the law of one. Can you state any other breaking of the law of one than this basic rule? Ra, I am Ra. As one proceeds from the primal distortion of free will, one proceeds to the understanding of the focal points of intelligent energy which have created the intelligences or the ways of a particular mind-body-spirit complex in its environment. Both what you would call natural and what you would call man-made. Thus, the distortions to be avoided are those which do not take into consideration the distortions of the focus of energy of love light, or shall we say, the logos of this particular sphere or density. These include the lack of understanding of the needs of the natural environment, the needs of other selves, mind-body-spirit complexes. These are many due to the various distortions of man-made complexes in which the intelligence and awareness of entities themselves have chosen a way of using the energies available. Thus, what would be an improper distortion with one entity is proper with another. We can suggest an attempt to become aware of the other self as self and thus do that action which is needed by other self, understanding from the other self's intelligence and awareness. In many cases this does not involve the breaking of the distortion of free will into a distortion or fragmentation called infringement. However, it is a delicate matter to be of service, and compassion, sensitivity, and an ability to empathize are helpful in avoiding the distortions of man-made intelligence and awareness. The area or arena called the societal complex is an arena in which there are no particular needs for care, for it is the prerogative or duty of those in the particular planetary sphere to act according to their free will for the attempted aid of the social complex. Thus, you have two simple directives: awareness of the intelligent energy expressed in nature, awareness of the intelligent energy expressed in self to be shared when it seems appropriate by the entity with the social complex. And you have one infinitely subtle and various set of distortions of which you may be aware, that is, distortions with respect to self and other selves. Not concerning free will but concerning harmonious relationships and service to others as other selves would most benefit. Questioner: as an entity in this density grows from childhood, he becomes more aware of his responsibilities. Is there an age below which an entity is not responsible for his actions, or is he responsible from the time of his birth? Ra, I am Ra. An entity incarnating upon the earth plane becomes conscious of self at a varying point in its time-space progress through the continuum. This may have a median, shall we say, of approximately 15 of your months. Some entities become conscious of self at a period closer to incarnation, some at a period farther from this event. In all cases, responsibility becomes retroactive from that point backward in the continuum, so that distortions are to be understood by the entity and dissolved as the entity learns. Questioner: then an entity 4 years old would be totally responsible for any actions that were against or inharmonious with the law of one. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. It may be noted that it has been arranged by your social complex structures that the newer entities to incarnation are to be provided with guides of a physical mind-body-spirit complex, thus being able to learn quickly what is consonant with the law of one. Questioner: who are these guides? Ra, I am Ra. These guides are what you call parents, teachers, and friends. Questioner: you stated yesterday that forgiveness is the eradicator of karma. I am assuming that balanced forgiveness for the full eradication of karma would require forgiveness not only of other selves but also the forgiveness of self. Am I correct? Ra, I am Ra. You are correct. We will briefly expand upon this understanding in order to clarify. Forgiveness of other self is forgiveness of self. An understanding of this insists upon full forgiveness upon the conscious level of self and other self, for they are one. A full forgiveness is thus impossible without the inclusion of self. Questioner: thank you, a most important point. You mentioned that there were a number of confederations. Do all serve the infinite creator in basically the same way, or do some specialize in some particular types of service? Ra, I am Ra. All serve the one creator. There is nothing else to serve, for the creator is all that there is. It is impossible not to serve the creator. There are simply various distortions of this service. As in the confederation which works with your peoples, each confederation is a group of specialized individual social memory complexes, each doing that which it expresses to bring into manifestation. Questioner: can you tell me how Yahweh communicated to Earth's people? Ra, I am Ra. This is a somewhat complex question. The first communication was what you would call genetic. The second communication was the walking among your peoples to produce further genetic changes in consciousness. The third was a series of dialogues with chosen channels. Questioner: can you tell me what these genetic changes were and how they were brought about? Ra, I am Ra. Some of these genetic changes were in a form similar to what you call the cloning process. Thus, entities incarnated in the image of the Yahweh entities. The second was a contact of the nature you know as sexual, changing the mind-body-spirit complex through the natural means of the patterns of reproduction devised by the intelligent energy of your physical complex. Questioner: can you tell me specifically what they did in this case? Ra, I am Ra. We have answered this question. Please restate for further information. Questioner: can you tell me the difference between the sexual programming prior to Yahweh's intervention and after intervention? Ra, I am Ra. The sexual programming prior to Yahweh's intervention was the Ra, I am Ra. This is a question which we can only answer by stating that intervention by genetic means is the same no matter what the source of this change. Questioner, can you tell me Yahweh's purpose in making the genetic sexual changes? Ra, I am Ra. The purpose 75,000 years ago, as you measure time, was of one purpose only, that to express in the mind-body complex those characteristics which would lead to further and more speedy development of the spiritual complex. Questioner, how did these characteristics go about leading to the more spiritual development? Ra, I am Ra. The characteristics which were encouraged included sensitivity of all the physical senses to sharpen the experiences, and the strengthening of the mind complex in order to promote the ability to analyze these experiences. Questioner, when did Yahweh act to perform the genetic changes? Ra, I am Ra. The Yahweh group worked with those of the planet you call Mars 75,000 years ago in what you would call the cloning process. There are differences, but they lie in the future of your time-space continuum and we cannot break the free will law of confusion. The 2600, approximately, time was the second time, we correct ourselves. 3600, approximately, the time of attempts by those of the Orion group during this cultural complex. This was a series of encounters in which the ones called Anak were impregnated with a new genetic coding by your physical complex means so that the organisms would be larger and stronger. Questioner, why did they want larger and stronger organisms? Ra, I am Ra. The ones of Yahweh were attempting to create an understanding of the law of one by creating mind-body complexes capable of grasping the law of one. The experiment was a decided failure from the view of the desired distortions due to the fact that rather than assimilating the law of one, it was a great temptation to consider the so-called social complex or subcomplex elite or different and better than other selves, this one of the techniques of service to self. Questioner, then the Orion group produced this larger body complex to create an elite so that the law of one could be applied in what we call the negative sense? Ra, I am Ra. This is incorrect. The entities of Yahweh were responsible for this procedure in isolated cases as experiments in combating the Orion group. However, the Orion group were able to use this distortion of mind-body complex to inculcate the thoughts of the elite rather than concentrations upon the learning teaching of oneness. Questioner, was Yahweh then of the Confederation? Ra, I am Ra. Yahweh was of the Confederation but was mistaken in its attempts to aid. Questioner, then Yahweh's communications did not help or create what Yahweh wished for them to create. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. The results of this interaction were quite mixed. Where the entities were of a vibrational sum characteristic which embraced oneness, the manipulations of Yahweh were very useful. Wherein the entities of free will had chosen a less positively oriented configuration of some total vibratory complex, those of the Orion group were able for the first time to make serious inroads upon the consciousness of the planetary complex. Questioner, can you tell me specifically what allowed the most serious of these inroads to be made by the Orion group? Ra, I am Ra. This will be the final full question. Specifically those who are strong, intelligent, etc., have a temptation to feel different from those who are less intelligent and less strong. This is a distorted perception of oneness with other selves. It allowed the Orion group to form the concept of the Holy War, as you may call it. This is a seriously distorted perception. There were many of these wars of a destructive nature. Questioner, thank you very much. As you probably know, I will be working for the next 3 days, so we will possibly have another session tonight if you think it is possible. The next session after that would not be until 4 days from now. Do you believe another session tonight is possible? Ra, I am Ra. This instrument is somewhat weak. This is a distortion caused by lack of vital energy. Thus, nurturing the instrument and physical balancing will allow another session. Do you understand? Questioner, not completely. What specifically shall we do for physical balancing? Ra, I am Ra. 1. Take care with the foodstuffs. 2. Manipulate the physical complex to alleviate the distortion toward pain. 3. Encourage a certain amount of what you would call your exercise. The final injunction. To take special care with the alignments this second session so that the entity may gain as much aid as possible from the various symbols. We suggest you check these symbols most carefully. This entity is slightly misplaced from the proper configuration. Not important at this time. More important when a second session is to be scheduled. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one Creator. Adonai.